In the vast world of comics, pretty much every character dies and comes back, sometimes not even in that order. Villains, however, often don't die, but just get locked up. Of course, they still die on occasion, everybody dies. One of the most famous villains is from the X-Men comic series, Magneto. Magneto has something in common with another one of X-Men's most famous characters, the Wolverine. It isn't a metal-based character quirk or being a mutant or anything like that. It comes down to something everyone watching this video has as well. That is the ability to age. Most comic book characters exist in what is known as comic book time or a floating timeline. A floating timeline is where everything is in a standard system of one event, leading to the next, leading to the next. But everything moves along with the characters. So, if, for example, you had a character born in the year 2000 and is 10 years old, then the comic is set in 2010. But if you read about the same character in 2020 and they are still 10 years old, then his birth date is now in 2010. Comic book time usually keeps the dates consistent and just stops everyone aging, so characters like Superman are forever in their mid-20s. Comic book characters tend to age in phases. Getting older in time jumps especially in regards to younger characters, with children going from newborn to 5-year-olds to teenagers to young adults with no toddlers or preteens in sight.
Your father and I don't think you're ready to properly care for an animal until you're at least
10
years old. Wait,
now, hang on there a minute, you young whippersnappers.
Let's just hope this dog stays the same size.
There are, of course, exceptions, as with all tropes. Magneto, however, is different. Due to his origin story of being a Holocaust survivor, his birth date and as such his age is strictly tied to the Holocaust. And as comics are generally set in the year of their being published, he has an age that changes with time. And he actually physically ages. Compare the early images of Magneto to modern Magneto images. He has physically gotten older. This is what he has in common with Wolverine. Wolverine also has a birth date and ages with time. However, this is because his healing factor prevents aging, so he can live for centuries on end without physically aging. However, he does actually get older every year with the same birth date. So he and Magneto both do not exist on a floating timeline or in comic book time like the rest of comic book characters. And what this means for Magneto is that he must inevitably die. He can be de-aged and cloned and any other of 1,000 comic book ways of keeping characters alive, but he will still die of old age because eventually the Holocaust itself will be too old. Magneto's character is reliant on the Holocaust, not just for his origin, but his motivation and his philosophy. For most supervillains, those are just tacked on after the thought, but these are core to what Magneto is. They are a requirement. If you take them away, it is no longer Magneto. It is just some random villain with metal manipulation.
These are tense times. Be mindful not to sound like you actually are a mutant.
What if I were?
Run and hide before someone starts dreaming of camps.
In real life, one day, the last Holocaust survivor will die, as will the last World War II veteran and World War II civilian. And when this happens, Magneto must die with them. Now, to be clear, it's unlikely that Magneto will fully die. More than likely, he'll die from old age as a tribute or recognition of the final Holocaust survivors dying. but then come back possibly through something like cloning, a younger version that can then exist in comic book time with the rest of the characters. Or another way of resurrecting a character while making them younger at the same time. It's also possible that they would change Magneto's origin, possibly by making him a survivor of a different war and different type of camp. A more modern one, just as when Magneto was created in the 60s, the Holocaust was still very recent, just as some modern countries still have concentration camps. Or they could make up a Marvel-specific war with its own Holocaust that can become timeless and won't need to be updated every couple of decades. But the idea is that Magneto will die, and that idea is the idea of wartime suffering. The Holocaust isn't just a footnote in Magneto's origin. He is a direct living reminder of it. Now there have, of course, always been wars being fought every day since World War II. However, none have been like World War II. The entire world convulsed, and the suffering wasn't in faraway countries most citizens couldn't place on a map. It was in the streets. Your uncle was a victim, and soon enough it was in your own house that was no longer a house, it was a debris field. What Magneto's death means is a shift in the society where living memory of war at the doorstep, at least for Europe, is now over. But it also signals a time of war coming to an end as a whole. While there are of course wars being fought and have been fought, the Second Congo War in particular was the deadliest war since World War II. But the vast majority of the wars have been civil wars on smaller scales. Ultimately, while it is taking a long time, war is dying out. This is also evidenced by history, or more accurately, history education. Usually the last great war is taught until the next one happens, and then it gets shifted onto that. Most people, aside from those in certain education systems, learn about World War II, not so much World War I, or the Napoleonic Wars, or the American Civil War, or the Russian Civil War. And yet we still learn about World War II as it was the most recent. It's possible that the World War II education will become lessened after the last surviving veterans and citizens die, as it will have become much more distanced and seem less relevant. This would take decades to happen and would be a slow process. However, if this doesn't happen, it would indicate further a culture and progression of humanity moving further away from war. It would also have political impacts. A lot of people, both anti-Semitic and pro-Semitic people alike, develop their opinions or justify them through the Holocaust. The same goes for people who are pro or anti-communist, pro or anti-Germany. When all the people affected are no longer in the picture, it may become harder to justify their opinions both pro or against. And so that is why Magneto must die, and what will happen when he dies. Even if the character never dies, what Magneto is, will and must die. Another character, though, can't die. As I said earlier, Wolverine cannot die. And the idea of him cannot die either. And it's important he never does. Next video will be on exactly that. Stay tuned for more.
So small I could smite you with a step. There was a time I would smite you all for what was done to Storm. But today, I have saved you from your own. For an old friend has challenged me to remember this view of Earth. How vast it is, versus how small we make it. Charles Xavier entrusted me with his dream, and it does not ask you to love or embrace my kind as your own, but merely to accept that this is a shared world with a common future, and that my kind, like yours, have the right to live in it. I am trying to be better. Please. Do not make me let you down.